Busy week.
Oh, real busy week. Yeah, it's been crazy the last couple of weeks actually. Real full on.
Yeah.
I keep thinking
Yeah.
I'm going to get time and to sit down and have a yarn, and then something else comes across. I'm like, oh, not tonight. How are you getting
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, good. We've got some busy times at the moment at the Polytechnic too, because the first year students nursing students are out on
Oh,
practice, and they need a lot of looking after when they first go out because they're just new.
do they come
Yeah.
to you with heaps of queries and stuff? Do they?
Well, how it works with my job is I look after students when they're on practicum, but I'm from the Polytechnic, so but when the first years are out, we actually just stay with them all the time. We never leave them.
Even when you go out on site with them?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So
Wow.
we're on the wards, because they've actually, this is their very first practicum in the whole course.
Right.
So that they don't have any reference. They don't know what's what. So they have to have somebody there kind of looking after them all day.
So did
And the
people?
nurses are great, the
Yeah.
registered nurses, and then they start talking to them, but they start talking to them about all these things they can't understand a word they're saying. So yeah, because they've only been in school, like in university, about 6 weeks. So
Oh, so this is their first year, and they go straight
yeah,
into practicum. Wow.
yeah.
I always thought they did a
We
year
just
first.
Well, some of the polytechnics do, but we always do this little 1 week just look see.
Yeah.
So obviously it's like having a lay person just arrive on the ward, and then you can't get them to look after people, can you?
Nah.
So yeah.
Are you seeing a
So
drop
it's
in
just really.
students?
Mm?
Are you seeing a drop in students, or is there still heaps of nurses
No,
coming
there's
through the?
there's so much demand for nursing.
Oh,
I mean,
demand, yeah, but what about people coming in to fill the spots? Is there many people coming through the courses
yeah,
and
no,
stuff?
the students yeah, they're enrolling in the courses. So,
Oh, that's
but
good.
the advantage the nursing has is, even though that it might be a hard job and sometimes understaffed and that, there is a real clear pathway for your career. Like, some degrees are not like that.
No,
You could get a degree and never get a job. But
no, yeah,
nursing, you almost, like, even when they say they're not taking new graduates, within a year, all those new graduates would have been absorbed.
yeah.
So, yeah.
The problem is, you don't want to lose them to Australia.
Oh, well, that's what happens. I mean, my son's a nurse and he's nursing in Australia.
Yeah, earning much better money.
Yeah, much better money and better conditions. Like, they've got
Yeah,
staffing ratios over there, and yeah, much better conditions. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a good little segue anyway into what we're going to talk about, really, isn't it? It's all
Oh,
interrelated.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so last time we caught up, we talked through basically a bit of a background on autoimmune diseases in general. We
Mm,
touched a little bit on helminths and what they are. Um, we talked a
yeah.
little bit about your story, what you'd gone through, um, and we talked a little bit about. We just lightly touched on some of the pathways and stuff that helminths actually use to help sort of protect us, I guess.
Yeah.
So this time round, we were going to go into a bit more detail. Um, but actually, before we do that, I should say your book is out, hooked on gut health, isn't it?
On gut
Which
health.
we need more people to come and read that. Have you had many more people jump on and start reading it?
Yeah, lots of people, when they hear about it through some other, through social media or through your podcast or wherever, and then they come to me and then they buy my book. So that's quite a common thing.
Has it been
Yeah.
steady with people like getting it over the last few months since you released it?
Yeah, it's a steady trickle. I mean, I would like to get it into bookstores, because at the moment it's only available on Amazon. So I've been going through that process, contacting publishers, and you submit and then you wait, and so we'll keep fingers crossed, Adam.
Do you have to actually
Then,
go? Yes, that's right. Do you actually have to go through publishers to actually get it into a bookstore? Or
well, there is a printer publisher, they're called Bateman's, that you
uh,
can contact, and they, no, not necessarily. So it's a complicated thing. Sometimes you can just go through like a printer, but they still select their books. They're overwhelmed,
yeah, right.
so there's still a selection process that you have to go through. So,
Yeah.
and then you have to promote it with bookstores, and it's quite a difficult route, really.
Do you think you'll be able to get yours in there?
I'm going to get my book in there somehow, but
Yeah.
it might be a bit of a process. Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to be read. It's worth reading. I mean, I'm getting really good feedback from it, and people need to know. So
I think it's
yeah,
really good. And like I was saying to you last time we talked, I think the best thing that you do about your book is you pull a lot of the scientific information and the actual hard evidence and facts on what Helminths or what we believe Helminths are actually doing into the book. And
mm.
nowhere else really summarizes it like that into one place. So I think from that perspective alone, it's super valuable.
I really wanted to write something that was logical, took people logically through the reasons why we all need it, and the amount of accounts of people going into remission. I mean, it's very profound, but then marrying it up with the research. Every chapter is based on some research
Yeah.
and also personal stories. So yeah.
Yeah, I like how you weave in the personal stories. That's always quite nice. I think that
Mm.
when I jumped on board with this a few years ago now, that was some of the stuff that I leant heavily on was actual personal stories. I was
Yeah.
like, it's so good that people actually do write their stories up and share them.
I mean, it's actually really hard to get people to write stories. They have to be really profoundly affected before people sit down and write a story. And so it's a real testament to the therapy that, we've got 1,000 stories. There's many, many more success stories, but people don't necessarily tell their story.
Yeah,
So I think it is a real testimony that there's so many people willing to take the time, because it takes time to write your story, and everyone's having a busy life.
yeah. It
So
is important
yeah,
though, and admittedly, I still haven't done mine. I'm about halfway through, so I
exactly.
still owe a story as well.
Yeah, you do, you do, you do. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
All right, so for this round, I think what we wanted to try and achieve was to go into the details a little bit more on the actual mechanisms of what helminths are
Mm.
doing in the body, a little bit more of the scientific specifics, the more complex stuff, I guess. And when we caught up a while ago and we were talking through a little bit of the background on some of the stuff, and also an area in your book where you spend a lot of time, you talk a lot about the two major activation states. So there's the classically activated and the alternatively activated.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't really understand any of that until I picked your book up, to be honest. Do you want to talk
Yes.
through that in a bit of detail?
Well, I think that's in the last few years, science have really understand that you can have immune cells that act differently in different situations. So classically activated, say, eosinophils, which are part of your immune system, it cause inflammation, and they're
Hmm.
there to fight infection. So when you get exposed to a virus or something dangerous, then your immune system's classically activated, and that's the only pathway we really understood until fairly recently. But in actual fact, that you can get alternatively activated. So, and that's anti-inflammatory. And so when you've got Helminths on board, you actually have your eosinophils and other immune products like macrophages that have become alternatively activated, or in an anti-inflammatory way. So that's actually the basis. The pathways that are often inflammatory, they're using the same immune cells. They're just switching to an alternative activation. So I mean, the immune system's incredibly complex and amazing. So depends on what the your human body needs, what the environment is. So when you face an infection or pathogen, you get an immune system that's got that a classic attack mode that we kind of understood, where everyone understands that the immune system attacks pathogens, and that's what it's supposed to do when you're under threat. But when you're not under threat, we really need to be in a state of calm. The immune system needs to be tolerant and calm and understand what's dangerous and what's non-dangerous. And it needs, so basically at that point, those inflammatory immune cells need to be alternatively activated. I don't know that was well understood in science, 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, I had no idea, and I've never ever really heard about it talked about either. Um,
Yeah.
so if we just dumb it down a little bit more, if I cut my arm and
Mm.
and it gets a little bit infected, what's going
Mhm.
on?
So you get an immune response, and
Yep,
everything floods into the area to bring in an immune response to fight any infection. Clotting factors will go, and there's a clotting cascade that happens to heal,
yep,
stop the bleeding and heal. And yeah, the immune system's activated to make sure you're not getting any pathogens enter, because the skin's been, the integrity of the skin's been broken. So that alarms the immune system via the skin, receptors in the skin and receptors in all the tissues, really. So yeah, so basically you've got a classic inflammatory response.
yep,
Yep, and that's what you need at that point.
yep.
Mm.
And then how does that then roll into people that have got autoimmune diseases? So basically, they're almost got constant inflammation, right?
Yes, so they've got something abnormal going on with, they call them type 1 and type 2 pathways, but it's pretty primitive. I think we have a primitive understanding.
Are these
So,
like, is that the TH1 response and the TH2 response? Yeah,
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 yeah. So TH1 response. So there's something that's dysfunctional about your body's TH1 response or inflammatory response that is causing the immune system to recognize your own tissues as a pathogen. So basically, you're malfunctioning. Your immune system's malfunctioning,
yeah. And it's almost
and
always on, right? And that's part of the problem. Like,
that's all. Yeah, that's a type 1. Autoimmune disease is a type 1 kind of situation where you're constantly inflamed.
yeah, yeah. And
Mm,
so when we inoculate with Helminths and
mm,
they do their journey through the body and
mm.
they get to their final place and they grow a little bit and they start releasing some of their secretions, what are they actually doing in that at that point?
Well, with autoimmune disease, the idea is that they're down regulating those cytokines and those chemical messages that are that type 1 response,
Yeah,
um, and and modulating the type 1 and the type 2, but by all the entire immune system. Like, scientists love to put things in categories, but Helminths don't really do that. They modulate the whole immune system. But when you've got an autoimmune disease, it is your type 1 response that's abnormal. You've got a dysfunctional type 1 response, over inflammation.
yeah,
So it'll down regulate that, and it also produces some more anti-inflammatory molecules, which is your type 2 response.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
what's quite interesting about that is it's not like an immunosuppressant where you're turning off the immune system almost, and
No,
then
not at all.
um, become open to attack from anything
Mm,
at any point
mm.
in time. What I find interesting, and this is probably the part I don't fully get, is that it's modulating the immune system. So it's like bring it down to a baseline level where it should be, so that
Yeah,
your immune system's still on, it's still doing things, but it's been tempered. How
yeah.
is there
It's
any?
basically just fixed it. Like,
Yeah,
so it's not suppressing your type 1 immune response. In fact, you can still have an aggressive immune response when you've got Helminths on board. Scientists used to worry about that would, if people took Helminths, that perhaps it would down-regulate your immune response to pathogens. But it doesn't seem to be the case, because, like in Africa, they responded appropriately to the COVID virus,
yep,
but they didn't get the over excessive inflammation that went along with it. But they had an appropriate response. Africa did better because of the fact that they naturally host Helminths than Western countries.
is there any like how do the helmets know, or how does the body know to get it to a certain baseline? Like I don't. That's the part I don't quite get. Is
That's the
like
part nobody understands
yeah,
that, because it's an ancient relationship, and we simply cannot replicate what a live organism does. We cannot, and sometimes I think we go down the wrong path when we try and break everything down into its little pathways. It's really handy for drug development, because they'll just pick a single protein, say that a helminth might secrete, and they'll look for what properties that little one single protein has, or signaling molecule, and they'll create a drug with that. But it'll have the same problems as every other drug, because the organism, the alive organisms producing hundreds of secretions, and they're all interacting with the host and with each other in a really dynamic way, and with the microbiome as well. So I think we really just get right off track when we start dividing them into, we only understand a few pathways
Mm.
anyway. We don't understand all the pathways of the immune system. They're discovering more all the time, which is nice. But the end result is the same. They want to go down a drug path, and they want to then block that and see what that happens, or stimulate that pathway. But that's that's a road to nowhere, I think.
So it's quite remarkable in that
Interesting,
sense.
the
Yeah.
interesting thing with this type 1, type 2 response is, so if you, those of us that have autoimmune disease or had autoimmune disease, we've got an abnormal type 1 response. But those of us with allergy, asthma, and eczema have an abnormal type 2 response. So say in the case of asthma, you've got an abnormal type 2 response, and you've got an inflamed lung because your type 2 immune pathways are inflamed when actually they should be anti-inflammatory. Type 2 pathways are anti-inflammatory. So it's just that they've gone wrong. They're abnormal. They're not responding in a normal type 2 way. When you get Helminths, they also provoke a type 2 response, but the type 2 response is an appropriate one because it's basically fixed the pathway. So again, it's modulating the type 2 response in things like asthma. Well known to be really successful using Helminths to treat asthma. And you've got these as high eosinophil levels that are actually really abnormal. They're classically activated. They're abnormal eosinophils, since you've got these really high levels. And so, yeah, it's quite almost the opposite of what's happening in autoimmune disease, because it's a different pathway. And when you have Helminths, they act on the type 2 pathway to calm that down. So they act on both pathways.
Which is interesting because, like you're saying, they're the complete
Yeah.
opposite pathways.
Well, yeah, that's how we look at them.
That's how we
I
look
don't
at them, but
Wow. I think they're a dynamic
sure.
interchange, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, and our primitive human understanding is that's how we look at them.
Now,
Yeah.
with helmets, do we know what they're actually doing? So people talk a lot about helmets and secretions, right? And
Yeah.
do we know what they're doing in there that's actually modulating both
Well,
immune systems?
they're starting to really study the secretions, but they've discovered proteins that do wound healing, and they think that's an ancient response to the fact that some Helminths create some damage to the host, like say hookworm that we use. They do these micro punches. They're going through the skin.
Yep.
That's the Nicotor americanus, the people's worm. Goes in through the skin, and then it goes through the circulatory system, and it makes these micro punches through the lung and gets into the external space of the lung, and then they come up your esophagus and go back down into your gut. But on their travel through the lung, they do make these micro punctures, and so in an evolutionary sense, the thought is that they're actually healing damage that they themselves have done. But at the same time, it's really good for your lung. That's probably why that asthmatics have such a lot of success with Helminths.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Do they know anything else that the helmets are doing? So obviously they talk a lot about the secretions. Are there any other
Yeah,
key elements that
I think they do a lot of different things with their secretions, but we're only just sort of at the beginning of that journey to find out what each secretion is and how it changes with all the different environments, because these secretions aren't static. They don't produce a static range of proteins that do certain functions. They're dynamic depending on what the host needs. But the other thing they do is they stimulate the gut to produce more mucus, which is really quite a significant thing because our gut lining is quite degraded, and it's leading to inflammatory disorders of the bowel. And Helminths have a part to play potentially in preventing gut cancers and IBDs and those sort of inflammatory bowel diseases.
do you think to a certain extent, so I was thinking a lot about this the other day, do you think to a certain extent helmets are actually really malleable in the sense that they are adapting to their host in terms of what they secrete?
In real time.
Yeah, do you reckon there's an element of that? I know that's a probably impossible question to answer, but
It's impossible to answer. Like, I don't think anyone's studying that. They're only studying them for what they do, not studying how they're changing in real time. So
because
I don't
there
think
must be
anyone
an
can answer.
argument for that, right? Because every single person's very different. And although it's the immune pathways are the same that are triggering autoimmune diseases, allergies, all that kind of stuff. Each person is significantly different in terms of their makeup, their internal makeup, their gut
Well,
microbiome and stuff. So
I do think they are reacting differently to their environment depending on the host needs.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's a dynamic situation that we don't really fully understand, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's,
It'd be nice if
it,
we had more of that, eh? Like
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it?
it
It's
is.
so much. There's so much to study, but they know that helminths stimulate what they call a sweep, weep, and dump. So, so they stimulate the sweep is the peristalsis of the gut. You know, like the contractions of the gut that make us go into the toilet and move our
Yeah,
bowels. And the weep, they more secretions and mucus is released by our cells when they're stimulated by helminths, and then we go to the toilet more often potentially. Though you don't after you get used to them, but yeah, potentially. So that's called the sweep, weep, and dump. And that was a mechanism way back, in ancient millennia when our evolutionary ancestors were getting used to having helminths, so that was a mechanism to try and expel them. But over time, there's been a balance, that adaptation between the host and the helminth. We actually rely on their presence to stimulate appropriate mucus development, so that our microbiome is protected. We don't have leaky gut. We don't have the microbes in the microbiome leaking into other tissues in the body and causing inflammation. Then safely housed, basically, and our gut lining, all the immune cells are working, at optimal levels. When you get a small amount of helminths to stimulate the mucus lining, so that's why they think that's why that IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, colitis, that helminths, particularly the Helminth TSO, is really, really good for those bowel disorders. Mm.
Is there while we're just on that point, is there a big, do they know if there's a difference between like Helminths, sorry, not Helminths, but like NA, TSO, etc. in terms of what they're doing? Like, because obviously they're different hookworms, but are they secreting different things? They're doing the same thing within the body, but do
I
they know if
think
there's a
they
big
probably
difference between
are.
them?
I think they probably are slightly different, slightly different. They probably have a baseline amount of the same, but they're finding in this socio-medical studies that Dr. Parker conducted. They were looking at self-treaters and recording their findings from the experience of self-treaters. So there was hundreds of participants reporting on what they found. So they found that TSO was particularly successful with gut disorders. That's the good guts worm in my book. It's called the good guts worm. They also found HDC, which is the well-being worm, was particularly good for neuropsychiatric disorders. Other things, like arthritis, scleroderma, those sort of conditions, perhaps NA, the people's worm. But that's pretty loose because they do have a lot of crossover. So you can use Necator, you can use a people's worm for a gut disorder. Plenty of people are and do. Like Kyla Marie that does, she's on Instagram. She used the people's worm first, and now she's added the good guts worm TSO.
Yeah, she's
So
doing
she's
both, isn't she?
yeah, and I
Yeah,
do both. So
you do. Yeah.
many treaters find that they get even better results with two worms.
But
Yeah,
fundamentally, they're doing the same thing, right? They just might
I
react
think so.
internally in the body in slightly different ways.
I think it's slightly different ways. I think
Yeah,
they're all very similar. They all treat autoimmune disease and allergy.
yeah,
And it's just really, we haven't had enough reports for some worms because some worms are easier to get hold of than
yeah.
others, and they're maybe more economical. Like the first self-treaters were with TSO, but that was mainly gut disorders. That was the good guts worm, and then Necator americanus has, yeah, come along and had become very popular
Yeah,
because you can incubate it at home.
yeah. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
lot more economical doing,
it's a lot more economical. Yeah.
yeah, and
Whereas,
plus they technically last a bit longer too, don't they?
yeah, they
TSO
do. They do.
historically doesn't last as
Yeah,
long in the body.
that's right. You don't have to top up as often,
Yeah.
typically. Yep. Yeah.
Um, so you touched on quite a bit on the gut, which was a really good point and was the next thing I wanted to get to. So I wanted you do this really well in your book actually. You talk about that nice beautiful feedback loop between Helminths, the immune system, and the gut microbiome. Do you want to
Like,
do you want to talk a little bit more on the detail on that? I know you've touched a little bit on it, but I think there's
yeah.
more we can go into on that. I think it's a really important point.
Yeah. So the helminths seem to work closely with the other ancient organisms of the microbiome. They seem to have entered into a symbiotic relationship with them, with each other, and with the host. So we know that we might not know exactly how they do it, but we know from my studies that the microbiome of the mice is improved, like quantities of beneficial bacteria and diversity, which is the measure of health of the microbiome, is increased when you add in helminths. And when you take out helminths, the reverse happens. So the microbiome becomes slightly less stable, more tendency to drift into disease, and more, dysbiotic microbes are present. So they've done that in mice a lot. They've also done it in humans because they've studied humans that they're already doing mass helminth elimination programs. They call them parasites, of course. They're getting rid of parasites in whole communities. So they're mass medicating people. So because there was this connection with autoimmune disease and no helminths, scientists started looking at those populations of people that the health authorities were already rolling out regular anti-helminth, anti-parasite treatments. And then they'd measure their microbiome before the treatment and after the treatment. So it's, if you can call it a treatment, because often these people were living in their villages and they're nice, well fed, they're living traditional, sort of less stressful lives, and they actually weren't having any problems from the helminths they were carrying. But it's just because of that groupthink that we all developed, last century, where that we saw a lot of poverty and displacement, and they all had helminths, and the helminths got blamed for a lot of that situation. And no doubt, because they were displaced, no doubt they did have massive overburdens of them, so they might well have been a problem. But anyway, these people, I'm thinking of the studies in the Indonesian people on these islands, that they measured their microbiome before and after the helminth treatment, or the anti-helminth treatment. So they wiped out their helminths and found that their microbiome was more dysfunctional afterwards. They also found that their insulin insensitivity increased. So they
Oh,
developed pre-diabetes,
wow.
or a tendency towards pre-diabetes. So the recommendation at the end of that particular study was that if they're going to do mass anti-helminth treatments, they should then start to monitor the population for diabetes,
Wow.
which seems completely nonsensical. They weren't sick in the first place. They treated them for something, eliminated a natural organism in their body, and then that recommendation was to start testing for diabetes because they might have caused a propensity to diabetes. And so that's interesting, isn't it?
You would have thought they'd learned
Interesting
from
and
that,
quite
eh?
terrible, really.
It
Talk
is.
about interfering with people. Yeah. Having said that, but there may well be cases where the case can be made for mass treatment, because maybe some situations the people who did have too many helminths because of poor sanitation, and they just developed a massive overburden, and also there are dangerous parasites out there.
Yep.
They're not all beneficial organisms. So
So
yeah.
what's how is that feedback loop working in conjunction with each other? Because I think they're all kind of working together, right? Helminths, the immune system, and the gut microbiome are all kind of working in sync. And you take one out, and you basically take the balance out of the equation.
Yes.
So how's that actually working?
Yeah, well, how exactly it's working, I don't think anyone knows, but
Yeah.
they only know that the system is destabilized afterwards. So therefore, all the host, or the human, or the animal, yeah, it could be either, is then all they need is another stress, and that could be antibiotic use, or it could be a virus, it could be a highly processed diet, and it could be lack of exercise or lack of vitamin D. Those are things that we've traditionally, evolutionary wise, had in our life, like lots of exercise, less psychological stress in our lives. So these things can then, when the super organism is destabilized by removing one of those partners, then you have destabilized it, and then another stress comes along and we tip over. And of course, modern life has introduced all these other factors. I mean, I remember my parents used to talk about their childhood, and they rode their bikes everywhere. And if it wasn't a bike, it was a horse. So, that they were just active, because if you own a horse, you have to look after the horse, and, it's a form of exercise. And they didn't have nobody had a car. Very few, only the really rich had a car. So
Hmm.
everybody else was on foot, on bikes, on horses. And so everything was done manually. The farming was done more manually than it is today. And they were outside getting lots of vitamin D. Their diet, they grew, they grew vegetables. Nobody had takeout. So yeah, they just lived a healthier life. And so gradually over time, when you lose your Helminths, you become destabilized, and then there's these other factors that have come in and caused this massive upswing in autoimmune disease.
Is
Mm.
there is there one of the three which is orchestrating the whole thing? Like if you took
Mm.
is it taking Helminths out that causes all the other issues, or is it a poor microbiome in the first place? Or
I
is it
think we still have some issues because of modern life, but we just have a vastly reduced rate of it,
yeah.
because we've just been more resilient to these other pressures. So you just get way fewer people succumbing to autoimmune disease and allergy. Actually, I had an interesting conversation with Dr. William Parker, who studies Helminths, about
Yeah.
the microbiome, and how the microbiome is such a significant, factor in our health. And when you destabilize that, and he likened it to an autoimmune disease in itself. When the Helminths
Interesting.
are removed, the microbiome is attacked by our own immune system, because the
Is that right?
Helminths immune system have, yeah. So basically, the dysbiosis within the microbiome drifting off, and our immune system being dysfunctional without Helminths, causes a perfect storm for the immune system to attack the microbiome, thinking that it doesn't belong. And that's like an autoimmune disease, because the microbiome really is us. It's part of us. So we can think of it as a self-attack, just like in type 1 diabetes, when the immune system's attacking the beta cells in the pancreas.
Yeah.
When the immune system attacks the microbiome, it's attacking itself. It's not recognizing self.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know that. Interesting. Because I mean,
yeah,
I guess
it can be thought of like that. Mm.
it's easy to forget that the microbiome is actually alive. It's not a stagnant
Yes.
type thing. It's a living organism.
Yeah, and the microbiome is fascinating, because years ago we didn't understand about the microbiome, but we now know that the microbiome, which is trillions of organisms, and many, 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 thousands of different species, come together as a whole, and they work together. Basically, they swap their genes, and so they produce their good benefits as a whole dynamic organ. And they are doing 150 times more functions than our own host cells.
Yeah, that's
So literally,
incredible.
without the microbiome, we die. If you eliminated the microbiome, it's not survivable. So the
That's
microbiome
incredible.
is even more fundamental to the superorganism than Helminths. Helminths came a little bit later, and we adapted to them. Like the microbes of the microbiome probably were with us from when we were little more than single cells or groups of little cells. The microbiome and our human ancestors would have joined together And then later on, when we're a bit more complex, and it's like a squid or something like that's got a gut, then the Helminths came along, but it's still, millions and millions and billion years ago. So that the relationship's still close, but it's not quite as close as the microbiome. But the relationship between the microbiome and the Helminths, they're living together in the gut, and they have formed their own symbiotic relationship that without them, the microbiome's drifting off and our immune system's drifting off. And so, yeah, you've got the perfect storm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the problem is it just steadily gets worse, doesn't it? You know, like it's a spectrum. It's not a exact point. It's not like you all of a sudden wake up and you've got this autoimmune disease. It's a spectrum that's
Right.
been taking time.
Yep.
Um,
It
and
takes a long time to get sick for some people, and it takes a long time to get better as well.
and that's exactly what I just wanted to ask you about. That is it's the repair process.
Mm,
Because reading a lot of the stories on the Wikipedia and stuff, and talking to you and other people, it's very clear that the time frames of potentially seeing benefits from using Helminths can take
yeah,
years. And really,
yes,
that's almost a healing process, isn't it? It's like it's
yeah.
taking the Helminths that amount of time to slowly unwind the damage that's been done. Is that how
I
you
think
see
it's
it?
a game of two halves because you see, little children with eczema getting better within 6 months to 1 year, or even within 3 months. So children with, eczema's being perhaps fairly localized, might be widespread all over their body, but it's just that one disorder. They haven't got a chronic disease state. Um, the eczema seems to get better really quickly in children. So the younger you are, the less serious disorders, they can get better incredibly quickly. And then you see the other spectrum of people like me who had a chronic disorder for 8 years before I found Helminths. And I was explaining in the last session that we had
Hmm.
that my lung function deteriorated from 120%, which is the sort of top of the normal, down to less than 80, which is just slightly abnormal. And then every year I get my lung function done because I've got scleroderma. It's great to get monitored. So I still get monitored. And then this year, which is I'm now 7 years into the Helminth journey, this year my lung function went from just below the 80, 78% to 95%.
In this last
And
12 months, or during that last
well,
7 years?
actually, it's been 2 years since I had my last one because I was a little bit slack that year before. Because I felt, well, you just put things off. Um, and I did take up pickleball during that time. But remember, I was talking about myositis. I could hardly get up our stairs, and
Yeah,
there's no way I could have played pickleball.
yeah.
So the helmets helped me get well enough to be able to exercise. And then the exercise helped me get more well because lack of exercise is not good for us. So yeah, so it's like a combination effect. You've got to get reunite the superorganism and then bring back all these other things that we need to be healthy, like the good diet and the exercise and the sunlight.
But that
Mm.
takes time, right? And I guess that was kind of what I was hitting on when I was talking to you last, or I was reflecting on after we last talked, is that it's not an immediate fix. There, you've got to
No,
unwind damage that's happened. And
yeah,
I think from all the stories, and this is the really cool part, I think from all the stories, and even your story as well, just looking at that alone, you can undo that damage. You can rewind, and it is possible, but it just might
yeah.
take some time. So you really got to commit, don't you?
You've got to commit for the long haul, especially if you've been unwell for a long time or you're a little bit older.
Yeah.
So it's like you need to do so much reading and research, and it's all there. There's so much research that you can read, and so many people have gone before and come, much, much better, or if not full remission, that you've got to be really steadfast. So I'll often say to people they want to start Helminths, and I'm like, well, you need to find out more about it so that when the next fad comes along, you're not jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing. You have to stick the distance. And it's so good if they have those small improvements early, because then that gives people faith. But I've known people who've not had a lot of improvement in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
But they stuck it out. They kept retreating and kept, moving the dose up a little bit, and just experimenting with it, and in about 2 years they started to get better, and then things just got better and better.
Yeah, it's
So
just
those
yeah.
people are just as capable of going into remission as the ones that respond early, but it's just they have to be really steadfast in their approach that this is the answer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just yeah, that's kind of mind blowing to me that you can almost undo that damage naturally,
Mm.
you know? Well,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, naturally.
And because it can be slow for some people, that's why some people will need their medications in the early stages, because some autoimmune diseases can be pretty serious, and they can be aggressive disorder, and Helminths for some people can be slow. Like it's a slow modulation. So you need both.
Yeah.
And potentially you might need both forever. But if it works, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Mm, mm.
Um, is there anything else specifically on the science and that sort of thing that we should touch base on before I had a couple of other sort of random questions I wanted to ask you? Do you think there's anything
Yeah,
else that we should touch on?
I think the science is that it down modulates an over and aggressive immune system. It upregulates the anti-inflammatory state. It increases the mucus in the gut, which helps prevent leaky gut and bowel disorders.
Yeah.
And it interacts with the microbiome and improves your microbiome, which is that's a huge area making people unwell because it's drifted off into dysbiosis.
Yeah.
So those are the four key things I think people should think about.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, you touch on a bit more of the detail on that in your book, right? Like again, you
Yeah.
go through that in a bit more detail. Yeah, she has some scientific people you talk to as well as papers and stuff that you look at and the research behind
Yeah.
it. So definitely worth reading the book. I wanted to, so on the gut side and the nutrition side, I wanted to ask you something. So I follow a few accounts on Instagram, and they're solely focused on the carnivore diet. Now I know that I'm not jumping on the hype train, but it's very interesting because there's one account that I follow is this guy called Lash, and he had really, really bad psoriasis, really bad psoriatic arthritis.
Yes.
He'd had it for 20 plus years. Like it pretty much ruined his life.
Yeah.
And he decided to give the carnivore diet a go. And we're talking full carnivore. So he basically just went ruminant meat and salt, and that was it. And within, I think it was within 6 to 12 months, he cleared himself up completely,
Yeah.
including his psoriatic
Yeah.
arthritis.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, an incredible story, and I've listened to a
Yeah.
few podcasts and stuff that he's done, and I watched a little bit of his
Mm.
content, and I
Yep.
was just wondering what you thought on that because that's
Yep.
quite he's not an isolated
No.
example either. There's plenty of
Yep.
others that preach this stuff too.
Yep.
What do you
Yep.
reckon on
And
that sort of
all
thing?
the different diets seem to have people that have success with the various different diets. And I think what's likely happening is they're profoundly altering their microbiome, and their microbiome was probably really dysfunctional. So
Yeah,
by eliminating some of those species within the microbiome, because you've got quite limited fiber and a high meat diet,
yeah,
you're gonna drastically change something within the microbiome. And maybe for those people they needed a drastic change in their microbiome, and that diet did it.
So do you reckon in a way it's basically them starving out
Yeah,
the bad
I'd say
stuff in the
so.
microbiome? Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, okay.
So, but the only thing I'd say, I mean, if you get success, and that's fantastic for those people. But is it a long-term healthy program if you haven't got a good microbiome, and you aren't feeding your microbiome with fiber, which we know is good? And we know some people are allergic to the same things that provide fiber. So, lots of people are eliminating things from their diet because the microbiome is dysbiotic. It's going off, it's not healthy. But it's fundamentally seems to be, I don't want to say the wrong track, but is it going to be your future health is this going to be a long-term thing for your future health? I wonder, because the microbiome is going to be very restricted with a full carnivore diet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree.
And it's
That's
cured
that.
his problem, and that's fantastic, and I don't doubt it. I don't doubt.
Yeah.
I think that people are using the antibiotic protocol, which is that's minocycline and doxycycline, and likely that's the same thing. They're using those antibiotic drugs, and it's killing off some of the bad bacteria within the gut. Likely that's what's happening, and that's actually helping some people because their microbiome's dysfunctional.
So
But
how does that work from an immune? Is it how does it work? Because obviously autoimmune is immune function dysfunction, right? So
mm,
if they've got a heap of bad microbiome in the gut, how is that
mm.
exactly
Well, the
affecting?
microbiome's a huge influence on our immune system.
I
So the
agree. Yeah, it's
microbiome and the gut health is producing a lot of the molecules that the immune system needs. So it's just the same as the helminths. These live organisms are actually interacting directly with their secretions, with
yeah,
their signaling molecules. And again, the microbiomes are an even bigger force health wise or unhealth wise, illness wise, than the helminths. But what's happening without the helminths is that's what's affecting the microbiome in lots of people. So that's why this massive organism in our body, this organ-like creature in our body, is becoming dysfunctional because it hasn't got that partnership with this keystone species, which is the helminth. It's like I talk about the otters in the Pacific, and they were hunted to extinction, and then the sea urchins got out of control, and then
oh,
so they ate all the forest and the marine forest, and so that with the loss of that keystone species, the whole ecosystem was affected, and that's what's happening with our
yeah,
microbiome. So for me, a special diet, that's worked, but I don't. It's not fixing the root cause of the problem. I hate that name because everyone uses root cause, but it's actually this is the truth that helminths are the keystone species that can fix your microbiome,
yeah,
and the microbiome is such a huge influence on our health.
yeah, yeah. No, that's it's an interesting analogy using the
But some people are on very restricted diets because they're reacting to all sorts of foods as well. Plenty of people are allergic to all sorts of foods, so they end up on, gluten-free, dairy-free, um, things like tomatoes they'll react to, onions. So they some people have actually developed full food intolerance, and it's been fixed by adding in helminths.
I mean,
There's a
it's yeah. I mean, you only have to listen to Kyla talk about her journey, and she
yeah,
talks a lot about the food that she couldn't eat, and now that she can
yeah,
eat.
she
I mean, that's
does.
that's also quite interesting, right?
Yeah, that's Kyla Marie on Instagram, and
Yeah,
she's amazing. And she talks about her journey with Crohn's disease,
yeah,
and
she
she
does,
really
and
likes
it's
it as
her
well.
journey of having nothing, being able to eat nothing, to basically now just having everything is pretty
Yeah,
cool. Like
yeah, it's very cool. It's
it's
very
very
cool. Yeah.
very cool.
Mm.
Now we kind of couple minutes left, and I just um, there were two things I want to touch on quickly. We loosely touched about this on the first time we caught up about 6 weeks ago when we did the first episode. But helmet safety. Do you want to just touch base on that a little bit?
So,
Because I
so
imagine a lot of people have got concerns, right, when they think about this idea of
yeah,
inoculating themselves with these little worms.
yeah.
You want to talk about
So,
that?
so the therapeutic worms, they can't breed inside you. So they're just their life cycle. It's just impossible. They do lay eggs inside you, which you poo out, and then traditionally they would go into the soil and go back into a human a week or two later as little larvae. So that's their life cycle. So they don't actually multiply inside you. So that's the number one thing. You
Hmm.
only get what you take.
Yeah.
The other safety concern is their side effects, and it depends on the worm. So the people's worm, there is some small side effects. Most people don't have small, and other people can get more severe side effects because we're not used to them.
No,
So
not at the
we have
not
to
in,
get it,
yeah.
establish a relationship again. So one has to know, what conditions, if you've got a very serious condition that, is not, maybe you're very, very, very dangerously unwell, that might not be the best time. But for most people with autoimmune disease or allergy, the side effects are trivial compared to most pharmaceutical drugs. And, the researchers have basically said that compared to any pharmaceutical drug, the safety profile is way higher. But that's not to say there's not the odd exception.
Yeah. And it's
Mm,
controlled too, right? You can control the numbers you inoculate with. And like you
that's right.
said, that's a fixed
Yeah.
number until
Yeah.
they die in
So
the
there's
body at
about
some point.
10 criteria that the hope to be a therapeutic Helminth, and we've only got 4 so far, but there will be others out there. It's just that we haven't studied them.
Yeah.
So there's strict guidelines for how you would qualify, how a Helminth would qualify as a therapeutic worm. Yeah, it can basically cause no harm in the average user.
Yeah.
At small controlled doses.
Yep. Yeah, and we're talking small controlled doses to start with, less than 5 type thing, no more
That's
than
right.
5.
So 3
Yeah.
or 5 to
3 or
start
5.
with, and then gradually escalate the dose to a maximum of about 30 this is for Necator americanus, 30 every 3 months.
Yeah.
But that's still a minuscule dose. It's a tiny dose. And then there's TSO, and they've come up with the little ova from the a pig whipworm that comes in a solution, and you take a bottle of that every fortnight, and that's been given to hundreds and hundreds of trial participants quite safely. HDC is licensed in England as a supplement, so it's got a very good safety profile. As TSO is licensed in Thailand, these are easily accessible.
Yeah,
you can get them easily,
and as we just said, very safe.
very safe.
Yeah. The last thing I want to touch on quickly before we wrap up was Helminths and pregnancy. And what are your thoughts on this? Because it's quite an interesting dynamic with mum and child, right?
It seems to be that children born to mothers that host Helminths have a lesser propensity to eczema and allergy and asthma. So that's the studies they've done in populations where there's been deworming programs again. So comparing the children with Helminths and with women who have had them eliminated. It's a good idea to host Helminths in pregnancy, but we don't really know. Introducing them in pregnancy is a bit of an unknown. But for people, there's plenty of women out there treating with Helminths that have become pregnant. And actually, for some women are reporting that it helped them become pregnant, helped them with fertility issues.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Women are reporting that it helped them with endometriosis. So it's helping people get pregnant.
Yeah. So again,
when you are pregnant, we don't know. We haven't got reports of that yet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is there a higher propensity for a mother that's got an autoimmune condition that's not treating, that has a kid? Is there a higher propensity for that child to also have an autoimmune disease?
Well, it might not be the same one.
But not the same one, but
yes, that's right. So if the mum's got eczema, for instance, then there'll be a higher chance in her children, and that's the case across the board. So if people talk about the risks of hosting when you're pregnant, well, the risks of not hosting when you're pregnant might be worse.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be. We have people in our family that have taken Helminths all the way through their pregnancy. Now they were on Helminths before they got pregnant.
Yeah.
So then they continued on, and their children did not suffer. The child didn't suffer from the same condition that the mother was treating for. So I mean, we're not talking about a lot of people here, but we do have the example of women who naturally host in places like Africa and Asia. They naturally host in Helminths, and of course that's just part of their gut biome, and they continue to host through their pregnancies.
Well, because that comes back to an interesting point around the biome, right? Because that's how the child's biome is seeded, is from the mum to start with in the first place, right? So if we believe that the microbiome and the Helminths and the immune system are part of that superorganism, and there's value in potentially hosting Helminths while you're pregnant to enhance the opportunity that the biome is as strong as possible to pass it on to your child.
And the immune system develops appropriately. So they're molecules call them magic molecules in the
Yeah.
book. So their secretions, the molecules they produce, seem to cross the placenta and help the baby's development of their immune system. That's what the thought is, that's happening. That the helminth itself does not cross the placenta. Therapeutic helminths do not infect the baby when you're
Yeah.
pregnant, but their molecules do. And the same with being breastfeeding, the molecules that the mother, if the mother's taking helminths regularly, then the molecules go through to the breast milk and helps the development of the baby's immune system. So it helps modulate the baby's immune system right from the start, so they've got a good chance of not developing these disorders.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't think about the side of breastfeeding, and because again, the mother's milk's tailored to the baby too, isn't it?
That's right.
So again, there's a very strong argument that carrying helminths during pregnancy is actually quite valuable, especially for your child.
There are reports from self-treaters that have been treating themselves with helminths. They get pregnant, they treat themselves all the way through because they know that they got rid of their own condition from having the helminths, so that for them the risk of not having them during pregnancy is higher than any other risks.
Yeah.
So they continue on through their pregnancy, and we've got reports that the pregnancy went well, the baby's born healthy and well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. I think it'd be nice to see more studies on that, I think, because you can potentially...
Well, they have done it in mice and rats, and they've talked about giving the baby rats an infection that causes brain inflammation, and they've studied whether the mother, they've given the mothers helminths or they've kept them helminth free, and they can see the difference in the outcomes with the babies, the little rat pups that received the helminth molecules during pregnancy. Their rate of death, it goes right down, and lifelong disability goes right down, and they give them pretty nasty infection, that would cause 50% to die and the other 50% to get a developmental disorder. And it's a huge difference.
I know you don't necessarily like using the term root cause, but inoculating with helminths from the very start during pregnancy could be a way of helping to dampen that autoimmune
particularly
shift,
for
right?
a young woman, so that the delicate processes that help with getting pregnant, your fertility, isn't interfered by chronic inflammation.
Yeah.
So our young women are a really important group to treat.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, totally.
Everybody. But I mean, women are particularly prone to autoimmune disease.
Maybe that's the answer. Everyone should be inoculating with helminths from the get-go. And then
from the get-go, of course.
Get rid of it all.
Well,
we better leave it there. We've almost done an hour.
Okay.
I think there's quite a few more things we need to unpack further, isn't there? So we'll have to jump on and do another one.
There's lots to talk about.
But no, thank you, Jane. That was good. I think we got through quite a bit of the mechanisms, which I think is really important. I think that helps people when they understand what's actually potentially going on. So I think it was a good session.
Always nice talking to you, Ben.
You too, Jane. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.